for those of you who are here this morning for the wonderful presentation from Aristocrat, I had mentioned that both that and this afternoon's presentation fit right in the heart of this desire to find ways for RG campaigns to be more impactful, more effective, and ultimately to cause behavioral change, to cause people to do things differently than they might have done them in the past. One of the people who is at the forefront of looking at this, examining this, and helping really broadly the industry as opposed to a single company through this process is Dr. Marla Stafford from the Lee Business School at UNLV. I'm an exceptionally lucky person because not only, as I said, do I know Chrissy from this morning, but I'm also fortunate enough to get to work with Marla on a couple of projects at the Gaming Institute. So, without further ado, I'm excited to see this again. Dr. Marla Stafford.
Thank you, Alan. So I'm really excited to be here. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I was introduced to him, and he asked where I worked, and I told him. And he said, oh, you're in the Lee Business School. What are you interested in here with problem gambling? And it's a legitimate question. Why am I interested in that? Well, I'm not an addictions expert. There are a lot of you here, and I won't profess to be that, although I work with people who do have experience and knowledge in that area. But yes, I'm a marketing professor. And one of my areas of interest is marketing for social good and marketing for well-being, which is a very important paradigm these days in marketing. And I've worked in this area for a while. So what that means is that my interest in marketing and how can we use marketing for better purposes than just selling goods and services. And I did that for a while, but I am really interested in using my background and my skills to actually make an impact in various areas. So my work has been in environmental health, and environmental marketing, things like that. But I've really gotten excited about all of my more current research, which is on gambling. And that's where my interest is. But the difference here also between me and some people, not everybody, is that I'm not on that side, as I said, of problem gambling. I am a marketer who believes we can educate and prevent. And that's my philosophy on this. And that's what I'm talking about today, is this idea about prevention before it gets to problem gambling. Because that's a problem. We've got this problem going on. We know that. You're here to talk about that. But I'm going to talk about marketing and advertising and talking about using creative advertising to actually overcome what we call selective attention in responsible gambling messages. So my side of the coin, again, in my research is more about this prevention and helping create messages that are effective. And as Alan said, I'm working on a couple projects with him on that side of the coin, and it's wonderful. And I think we're seeing a lot of changes in this area to help prevent these problems from occurring, because we all know that problem gambling is growing because of sports gambling growing and all the things that we've already talked about today. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this next hour. So I want to ask you all a question. So we're going to have a little audience participation here. I didn't set up a poll, but I just figured you can just call out like my students do, okay? What do you think? How many ad messages, and when I say ad messages, I mean any kind of communication message, did you see or hear yesterday? Just call out a number, what you think you saw. 100? What's that? 250. Do I hear 3? Do I hear 4? Oh, no. Any? Okay. So that's what we think we see. But let me give you an information piece that might startle you. On average, we are exposed to about 6,000 to 10,000 ad messages per day. That startles a lot of people. But you mentioned 250, 300, whatever it may be. But we do, on average, we are exposed, and that's an important word here. We are exposed to 6,000 to 10,000 ad messages per day. But only a quarter of those will be relevant. So you saw and heard, you were exposed, but you basically ignored them. We're going to talk about that. And how many did you pay attention to? Well, my guess is your answer, that 200 that you mentioned, That's what you kind of paid attention to, or you might have paid attention to. Yeah. And that's one of the challenges we have these days with messages and advertising in general. And we've got what's called ad clutter, okay? So what happens is when we are exposed to all these messages, because whether you think about it, 6,000, 7,000, we can't be exact, we engage in what we call selective attention. Selective attention is what we call our cognitive gatekeeper. It's what we do. And we don't always do this consciously. And sorry, I can't stand in one place when I talk. That's just me. I just have to move. So anyway, that is our cognitive gatekeeper. That means that we as individuals, we make this choice. Again, it may be our subconscious, but to decide what information we're going to let in. What we are our own gatekeeper, and we are going to choose what we let into our personal conscious awareness. We may subconsciously do this, but we are making this choice, and it's for our own personal awareness. Okay? We may not think about that. This is really pretty much an automatic type of thing that we do. We don't necessarily think about this. Okay, here we go. There we go. So in psychology, there's a definition for this, and I know there's some psychologists here, but we in marketing, we tend to have very few of our own definitions and theories. We tend to borrow a lot, and that's because there's a lot of good stuff out there. Why do we need to come up with our own? But we do come up with our own, but we're very heavily psychologically oriented. We use a lot of cognitive and social psychology. Selective attention is the capacity for or the process of reacting to certain stimuli selectively. That's a great way, right, to define something, using it selectively, but that's what it is, selectively, when several occur simultaneously. Now, right now, and I'm going to use this as an example, I'm talking, hopefully you're paying attention to me, and if you're not, that's okay too. But I can tell you right now, and we're going to talk about this later, there's people on the computer, there's multitasking going on, that's going to come up later in this discussion. But the idea is that you have several things going on in here. Even though I'm the speaker, I'm the main focus, you might be whispering to your friend, you might not, you might be doing a text. I mean, that's life, we know that, okay? But the idea of selective attention is hopefully, or you're in here because you want to be, you are attending to what I'm saying by choice. So and it is a message. It's not an ad message, but it is a message. So what's going on in today's society is that we have something called the attention economy. Anybody ever hear of that before? Yeah, well, it's pretty interesting what's going on because, I'm going to age myself here, but when I was a kid, and I'm from Chicago, we had NBC, ABC, CBS, Channel 11, which was public TV, and then WGN. We had 5 channels. I'm not going to tell you how old I was, but that's what we had. Okay, I didn't have cable. I didn't have DTV. I didn't have all these different channels. The internet certainly wasn't around. Okay, so compare that to today and what's going on today and what is competing for our eyes and our ears. What's happening is our eyes and our ears and our attention is becoming a very scarce commodity. You can almost call it valuable real estate because there is so much going on out there, right? And so much stimuli. You have kids or grandkids, whatever it might be, or nieces or nephews. There's so much stimuli going, so much out there, right? They don't know where to go first. That's when we're talking about the attention economy. Everybody is fighting for your eyes and ears. And that's an issue today, and not just where I'm going to be talking, about responsible gambling messages, but that's something that we are facing today in general, overall. I mean, that's just life, and I'm sure you see that with your kids and with yourselves too. We're distracted by so many media, so many stimuli. It's crazy what's going on today. So we're dealing with this attention economy. So we want people to pay attention to what we're saying, to what we're doing, to anything. And in terms of this presentation today and this discussion today, obviously, we want people to pay attention to what we are calling responsible gambling, and I'll get into that. So what affects our selective attention? What are some things that affect our selective attention and therefore will affect our choices, subconsciously even, to what? To attend to responsible gambling messages, right? So this is a general type of thing, but listening to your friend in a noisy room, you're at a party, and all of this stuff is going on around you, and music, or you're here, and you're at a casino, and you're playing the slots, and what are you paying attention to? I mean, oh, a casino, oh my goodness, talk about stimuli. Talk about what's going on in there. I came to a casino, I was 11 years old, and my parents brought us, okay, again, aging myself, to Circus, for the kids' stuff, whatever. And it was like, oh my God, and this was, again, before the internet. There's so much of this. So everything is competing for your attention. So listening to your friends in a noisy room, that's going to affect that attention of that selectiveness that you're actually going to try to pay attention to because you've got so much surrounding you. How about tuning out the TV while you're reading or you're playing on your computer, multitasking? Okay, I admit it. I grade papers and keep the TV on. Don't tell my students, but I do. It's what we do. Or we're playing on our phone. I can come around this room, and I'm sure some of you are texting or whatever it might be. And you know what? We used to think that was rude, but we don't anymore because that's just life. In fact, only about 28% of people use one device at a time. It's kind of a staggering number. In this day and age, that's what's going on. So you can see there's more and more going on with selective attention and getting through to people in that attention economy. Or listening to something else, or while other noises or distractions are competing for your attention. Okay, all of these things affect selective attention. I love this one, hunger. You may be here, but if you didn't eat lunch and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm starving, that's affecting your selective attention. That's affecting what you're processing. And then one of the biggest things, and the one I'm going to move into the topic of responsible gambling specifically with, is irrelevancy. So think about those 6,000 to 10,000 messages that you were exposed to yesterday. You didn't necessarily pay attention to, but you were exposed to. And I said, like, less than a quarter of them are relevant. Well, yeah, that's real important because they are irrelevant to you. And we ignore things that are irrelevant to us. It's one of the biggest factors affecting selective attention, irrelevancy. So now let's transition a little bit and talk more about selective attention and responsible gambling, because I'm bringing some basic ideas here, but they're extremely relevant to responsible gambling, message acceptance. In general, as I said, consumers avoid messages they deem irrelevant. We know that because of those 6,000 to 10,000 messages that you saw yesterday, most of you only paid attention to maybe 200. And a message that is simply too clinical or unengaging, tuned out, ignored. It's not even relevant. You don't even think about it because it's not you. It's technical, whatever it might be. So that's a very important part of this idea of responsible gambling here. And if targeted to typical or recreational gamblers, and some of you here might be a typical or recreational gambler, you go out with your friends, you socialize, you gamble, quote, responsibly, whatever, you're going to tune out certain messages, right? So you're not going to tend to it, let alone process it. Forget that. So what's happening now is that responsible gambling is a very technical term when you think about it. It's often equated with problem gambling. And that's a huge problem. The terms are conflated. And I'll tell you the truth, my brother-in-law is a psychologist. And he doesn't work in this area, but he is a licensed psychologist and all of that. And he even said to me, he said, Marla, what's the difference between problem gambling and responsible gambling? And he's an educated, smart person. It's just not his area. Well, you know what? He doesn't know. Most of the world doesn't know. And this is one of the biggest problems. And I know language was alluded to in an earlier presentation by Aristocrat today, too. And it's a very important topic for ICRG right now. And there are a lot of conversations being had about this. Why? Because responsible gambling and problem gambling are often conflated. And when somebody sees something about problem gambling, it's not me. I'm just a recreational player. That's what they'll say. So they're not paying attention to that message. Why would they? I'm not a problem gambler. I'm not, but a lot of people aren't. So they ignore it. That's not good, because we're not talking about problem gambling messages, we're talking about responsible gambling messages. And even though I know this conference, again, is about problem gambling, when I put in this proposal, it is about problem gambling. It's about stopping people from getting to problem gambling. It's about gambling responsibly so you don't become a problem gambler. And that's just as important, because if we can stop it before it happens, we're in much better shape. So yeah, it's often equated, the two of them, and that's what happens. So the message is not attended to, and it's not processed. And now what? And that is one of the biggest problems that I have found in the literature and in the real world about responsible gambling message, is this conflation. So what does that mean for marketers and advertisers who are trying to get across this idea about responsible gambling? So I'm going to ask you, you're all professionals in some capacity, whether you be mental health professionals, whether you be, a professional in the gambling arena. I mean, how do you define responsible gambling? It's a hard question to answer, isn't it? Obviously, it has to do with harm minimization. We all know that, right? It's harm minimization to some degree. But people think it's technical. Your average person who we are trying to target, right? The average person we're trying to target, they don't know. So they hear responsible gambling, and what do? They tune it out. They're not going to get the message. They are simply not going to get the message because they think, I'm not a problem gambler. And so what we need to do is to be able to actually get through to these people. These people, it's a generalization, but it's a lot of different people. We'll talk about that. And get them to attend to the message and process the message and respond to the message, which means we have to go beyond this idea of responsible gambling because they don't know what it is. And that's one of the biggest problems that we're seeing here. And I've just done on some of my own research, I have found people don't know what responsible gambling is. And then you say harm minimization, and they're like, what do you mean? We're talking about the person. We're not talking about us in this room. We're talking about the people out there in the casino, or that are online, or that are betting in sportsbook. So what does this mean for marketing and advertising responsible gambling messages? Well, it means a lot of things. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to show you some ads, and I want you to respond. Okay, they're going to come up, and I want you to look at these. These are just messages. We're just calling them messages. And I want you to look at these. Okay, which one gets your attention? Yeah. I mean, if you look at this, choose your offer, 200 plus free spins. Positive, that's fun. I'm going to go there, right? Can't stop betting nonstop, and there's plenty out there. I just pulled a few, right? Okay. It's not me. I'm going to go to the one that says 200 free spins. 1-800-GAMBLER, that's going to come up again later. I've seen that a million times. That doesn't apply to me. Choose your offer. Oh, first bet, safety net, bet $5, get $200. That's what my mind goes to. Those are the ones I attend to because I ignore the other ones. And if you look at them here right now, this one, this is a picture of a billboard, obviously, right here. But even so, and I could have cropped it more, but if you're driving by the way, just in advertising in general, it's not a really good idea to ask a question. Can't stop betting nonstop? No, you move on. It's not necessarily a good headline, by the way, just as a matter of practice in advertising. So which one of these, no, that's it. Those are the ones I have. Which ones of these are your favorites? The ones that are positive, that look fun. You're going to attend to those. And if you gamble, you're definitely going to attend to those, even if you gamble safely, responsibly, whatever that means, okay? So if you start to analyze what's out there, you start to analyze what's good about messages, and it's the ones that are positive, that are fun, that what the people can relate to. So what do we need to do to get through this? Well, we need to utilize the power of communication. So we talk about communication as being, we talk about advertising as being the communication arm of marketing. Okay, and advertising, by the way, the term has changed over the years. We cannot not always differentiate advertising from non-advertising anymore. It's just kind of run into each other. So I'm really talking about all kinds of messages, marketing communications. Okay, it's advertising in one sense. It may not technically be academically whatever advertising, but it's advertising because it's marketing communication. Okay, so we need to use the power of communication, and to do that, we need to understand how communication works and how advertising works and how effective it is. So that was one of my objectives of this session for the CEUs, was to talk a little bit about effective advertising. And so before we even get to attention, and I already mentioned that, we have the first thing is exposure. You need to be exposed. And I did already mention that earlier because I asked how many ads you saw yesterday. That's exposure. But as you can see by our previous discussion, doesn't mean anything. Exposure doesn't mean anything. You've got to get to the next level of attention. If you're exposed, it doesn't mean anything. But low involvement or high involvement, well, yeah, that's going to affect how much attention you give it, if it's selective or not. And we're not getting into this in detail during this presentation. I do want you to understand the process of how it becomes an effective ad. It does we have to interpret the message. We then have to remember the message. And then down here where it says purchase and consumption decisions, consumption decision, that means whether or not to gamble, how much to gamble, how long to gamble. Those are all consumption decisions. Every one of those are. So for a message to be effective in gambling, a responsible gambling message, it's really got to go beyond exposure and attention. It's got to go all the way through where it's actually grounded in memory. Now, again, I'm talking today about the selective attention aspects specifically and how we get through. But you have to get through that before you get to the rest of that, right? And there's a model. This is exposure, actually. For the first part, again, is that exposure, and that's where you have a stimulus, and the consumer responds to the stimulus. That's the exposure. And that exposure, that stimulus, can actually be communicated by a marketer or a non-marketing source. And it could be, for example, like just a responsible gambling ad or something along those lines. It could be anything. But we are exposed to stimuli every day. And that's what I was talking about earlier about the exposure. And what are some of those factors that influence this exposure that will take us to attention? Well, we've got the medium. That could be the internet. It could be traditional television. It could be magazines. It could be a bulletin board. It could be a sign out in the casino, which also is location. Okay, where it is actually, that message, that stimulus is out there. It could be anywhere. It could be on the side of a bus. It could be in the casino. It could be on the app. It could be online, anywhere. And then the source. And this is really important. And I'm actually probably going to be doing a study looking at the source of the advertising message in responsible gambling. And part of that was actually mentioned earlier today by Dr. Fong. Gentleman's name, I haven't met him personally, and he was talking about something that was very relevant to this. And he was saying, young people aren't going to respond to being told something by somebody. They want to hear from their own friends, their own age. Yeah, very true statement. So the source is really, really important of that exposure so that you will go to selective attention. So if we talk about it in terms of what Dr. Fong was talking about, yeah, you're not going to listen to your 70-year-old mother or grandmother telling you something about don't gamble, and they don't want to be told no. They're going to listen to their friends, right? And that's the source. So we need to look at some of those things. Those are some of the factors. I'm going to trip over this. And this was the stimulus that I had on here. How do you react to that stimulus? If you saw that, if you were exposed to that, well, you're attending to it because I'm asking you, but if you saw that, what would you do? You'd walk right past it. Just a perfect example of that. So if we look at that model and we go up from exposure to attention, we want to talk about what attention is overall, because if we want to overcome selective attention, we've got to look at what is it exactly that we're trying to get people to do, not just avoid it. So attention is the amount of mental activity that somebody actually devotes to a stimulus. That means what? They're letting it in. They are subconsciously or consciously saying, okay, I'm going to process this. That's attention. They're giving it attention. It enables efficient learning from exposure. Okay, all my papers just went everywhere. I'll ignore that. But it enables efficient learning. In other words, you are being exposed to it, you are attending to it, therefore you're processing it, and therefore you're learning from it. Okay? We also can define customer segments from that. Now, what do I mean by that? This is an important point in reaching the appropriate audience with the appropriate message. There are people who give these things a lot of attention. You can reach them in a different way than you can reach people who aren't attending to those, right? So we can actually segment, meaning grouping people by some characteristic on anything we want. Traditionally, people talk about demographics, age, and all of those things, but we can segment on any factor we want. And so one of the things that is useful in terms of segmentation, in terms of responsible gambling, is more frequent gamblers, less frequent gamblers, higher people who wager more. So there are a lot of ways that we can look at this and how we want to segment. The other thing, attention is weakened by habituation. And this is also very important in making sure that people process your message. Now, what do I mean by that? So think about this. I showed you that 1-800-GAMBLER number before. How many of you how often have you seen that? I see nods. We see that everywhere. You may not gamble, but you go to a casino for a, problem gambling conference, but you go to any casino for a conference for dinner, you see that 1-800-GAMBLER number everywhere, right? Do you respond to it? No. Why? Because you've seen it so many times, it's habit for you, so that attention is totally weakened. And that's one of the problems that we have with responsible gambling messages. And then, there we go. We need to basically figure out under what are the specific conditions do you give your full attention to advertising and marketing communications? That's the trick, actually. How do casino marketers, how do people in trade organizations and ICRG, how do they overcome selective attention to actually get people to give their full attention? Well, now I'm going to get even more academic because I'm just pulling these up, talk about, again, this is the effectiveness model. How do we get people to process that and actually integrate it into their existing knowledge structure? And that's what we're trying to do with advertising. So there's something called AIDA, and it stands for attention, interest, desire, action. And the classic model says we have to know first. We have to attend to something first, and then we actually like it, we feel, that's the affect, and after that, we will do something. So the classic model of AIDA and the classic model of advertising in the hierarchy of effects has to do with first, information, cognition, second, affect or feeling, and third, doing, okay? That's the traditional order. But a lot of research has shown that's not only true. And I believe in gambling, it doesn't hold. I'm presenting this to you because I think it's important, but I think in gambling, and it exists, the model is out there, it's affect first. Because why do people gamble? If you read the literature, okay, yeah, people think they're going to make money, but what? They want the endorphins, they want to feel good. That's that feeling part. So in that regard, even though the next thing I was going to share with you talks about this hierarchy of effects and what we do. Again, the classic hierarchy of effects, let's get people's attentions. This is cognitive. That's that attention at the bottom. That's information. Knowledge, liking, that's the affect, right? Feeling, all the way up to purchase, all the way up to or cognitive. It's the same thing. Learn, feel, do. But, as I said, that's the classic model. People have challenged that. And in gambling advertising, I am challenging that. And I believe, based on knowledge and research, we need to actually hit people at that feeling part first, that affect part. And that's because it goes to why do people gamble? To feel good. I know people, they go to gamble and to make money. I guess that happens, but that's not really why you should gamble, right? If you do gamble, it's supposed to be fun, and I'll gamble sometimes and people are they're having a lousy time. I'm like, it's supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun, go home. So we need to reach people where they want to be reached. And I think one of the issues that we're having is these cognitive messages that are out there, and don't do this. And, just the informative messages, they're not cutting it. We got to go past that. We've got to use the model that's feel, learn, do. In other words, get their attention. You have to get that exposure, but then make them feel something. And that's what I believe is the bottom line with overcoming selective attention too, is to get people to feel and respond. That's what's going to work. And that's what some of my research has shown, and that's what other people's research has shown. And there's other factors as well, but it's this, let's get people to feel, okay? And this just shows you how important it is to get more and more people to at least become aware, because it's what we call the inverted hierarchy or the inverted effects, but it just shows the idea of advertising, how many people you have to reach. If you reach 90% of the people that they're aware of something, to take them through what I've just been talking to you about, to actually use cognitive, which is over there, or in this case, engage in proper consumption, meaning gambling properly, not spending too much money, making cognitive doing types of decisions, actually doing. Look at where you have to start, even at the awareness, even if we're flipping this knowledge and liking, which is what I'm proposing. This is the classic model, but it's the same thing. We have got to reach a lot of people, and that's hard to do when people are tuning it out, because I'm not a problem gambler, they say. Okay, I'm not a problem gambler. I don't need to listen to all of this, right? What does it matter? Responsible gambling and problem gambling are two different things. So how do we do that? And I don't know how I'm doing on time since we lost a little time. Okay, we're good. Okay, so, because I want to leave time for questions as well. So how do we overcome selective attention? What are some creative approaches? We've talked about selective attention. We've talked about how we get through to people. We talked about how we can actually go through the effective advertising process, right? Well, we want to have creative impact. We want to have creative impact, and that creative impact lets you have an actual effect on your audience. It will leave a lasting impact on your audience, and that's what you want. Do you think don't spend, and there's some more creative things out there, we're going to talk about that, but the classic approaches is what I'm talking about don't spend and, limit your time. People, that's why it's not working, because it's just so cognitive and it's not having an impact. It is being ignored because people cannot relate to it, because that's not them, because they don't have a problem. They may not be gambling responsibly, but they may not have a problem. Those are two different things. So it is so important that the message resonate with the values of the audience, with the experiences of the audience, and guess what? What did I just talk about before? And the emotions of the target audience. And emotions play a really, really important part in getting people's attention. So let's kind of talk about a few things on how we can overcome the selective attention through target marketing and creative strategies. So first of all, as I already indicated, you must match the message and the medium with the appropriate audience. So to piggyback on what I said before, to piggyback on what Dr. Fong had said, you have got to make sure your source and your message are to the right people. So you're not going to have the 70-year-olds talking to the 25-year-old sports bettors. We know that. That's pretty much common sense. But now you got to get even deeper than that. So you've got different groups of people. And you know what? With sports betting growing so much, we've got to take a whole different tact. And actually, the leagues have gotten together, and that was one of the problems we were having technologically. I wanted to share with you later, which I think is a phenomenal ad, that they have engaged in some of the things that I'm talking about today. But sports betting is a whole new target market. Now, I have a 25-year-old son. I don't think he really engages in sports betting, but moms don't know everything, right? He's a 25-year-old guy. He loves sports. I don't know. I'm not gonna. We share a lot, but I don't. I hope to God, that he doesn't. If he does it just a little. But the point is, my son should be targeted in a preventive way. But he is definitely, whether he does or he doesn't, he should still be targeted in a preventive way, in a way that he can relate to, so that he won't. I'm hoping he never, if he does a little bit, but we don't know. We don't know what's behind people. We really don't know. We all know that gambling is the hidden addiction, and we want to prevent it from happening. So we need to reach those people that may not have a problem. So I'm mentioning my son because I don't think he has a gambling problem, and I don't think that he will have a problem, but I don't know. So I would not be averse to somebody creating a message to his target market specifically. And for sports betting, he's been to the casino. He's bored by it. He'd rather go buy something for his house. I don't blame him. Okay, well, that's great. So again, the point is, we are all different in here, and some of us may play and some of us may not. Some of us may do sports betting, some of us might not. Find out who your market is, find out what they like, find out the media that they use. We'll talk a little bit about that, but are they online? Well, most young people are online. Hey, I have some elderly cousins. They're always on Facebook. Cracks me up. What are they, 88? I have elderly cousins that are 88, and they're on Facebook all the time. So trust me, if you wanted to reach them, they use the traditional media too. But you got to really know your market. You got to understand what media they're using. And you've got to understand what they like. You've got to understand what they will attend to, which is what I was talking about earlier. Oops, I did that one too hard. So what are some things we can do specifically, creatively, and just different ways that we can think about this? So what did I say? Affect, feeling. Get people to what? To engage. Get people, it's got to be relevant. They want to relate to it. These are all things, otherwise the message isn't going to work. And the bottom line is you want people to feel good about what they're doing. You don't want people to feel bad. You don't want to be negative. So what are some things that we can do? Okay. Does anybody in here follow an influencer? You don't have to tell me who it is. Who in here has some influencers they follow? Okay, you don't have to tell me who it is or what it is, but a lot of women follow, there's beauty influencers, and my 73-year-old cousin, she follows so many people. I didn't even realize that. She's got all these influencers she follows. It actually permeates all age groups, okay? And there are sports influencers as well. You know what? Find out who your target market follows, and influencers are such a positive way to communicate a message that has to do with, quote, responsible gambling. And I'm not really discussing the term because that's a whole nother presentation. But to engage in gambling that is safe, that is harm minimization. That's the idea, right? So pick out whatever your influence is, and I don't care if they're a beauty influencer. There's nothing wrong with them even talking about it if it's presented in the right way. Getting ready to go to the casino and you want to look great, you can put it in that way. That's what I'm saying. Be creative, because we got to get through to the right people. So influencers are so powerful today. Years ago, we had the celebrity endorsers. Not as popular today. Well, that's because people like O.J. Simpson, who recently died, he was the Hurt spokesperson, and we all know what happens with that. There has been a resurgence of that, but influencers are the thing today. Influencers are much more powerful. People don't often think about that with messages, and it doesn't have to be, I have up there, top 22 sports influencers. It doesn't have to be a sports person. You do want to match it as best as possible, but people listen to their influencers. So that's the source. That's where the message can come from. Storytelling and narrative, that's also a very, very big thing today. Who likes a good story? We all do. Most people like a good story. And if there is a story being told, that storyteller is good, there's that source, and it relates to you. Oh yeah, think about with your friends. They're telling a story, and all of a sudden you say, yeah, I had that happen to me. Actually, just before I was coming in here, and I won't go into details, I was on the phone and had a, let's say, not so great experience with a particular company. And I came in here and I was telling Alan and Brett was saying, oh God, they're horrible. Okay, so I'm not telling you who or what it was, but the point is, all of a sudden she was engaged because she's had a bad experience with them too. That's human nature. So if you can tell a story that brings somebody in that they can relate to, storytelling is a very strong, positive way of reaching your market. And again, it's got to be the right group of people. It's got to be the right source. It's got to match the market. You've got to be telling the story that is relevant to them. That relevancy is so important. So storytelling and narrative is one of the more creative ways that we can get through to people. And if you've been to some of these conferences before, and I can't be here tomorrow, but some people that are actively part of these groups have their stories about problem gambling. They're openly, they've had gambling problems. They tell their story. Aren't they the ones that really, they pull you in? And I can say that about the executive director. I'm not saying anything he wouldn't say. His story is amazing. He's such a powerful storyteller. Do you know how much influence he has had because of that and because of who he is? Just such a perfect example of how powerful it can be. And if you can do that through a marketing communication message, you will pull people in. The relevant activities, yeah, show what people are doing. It's okay even to show a casino. And they're having fun, and you can communicate that message even through a story in the casino with your friends, with your peers. People don't think about that. Again, they think about, oh, you got to stop this, don't do this. No, talk about positive gambling, talk about responsible gambling positively and having fun. And you can talk something about like, yeah, and I did great because I only lost so much money. Yeah, well, I only lost so much money. Slice of life type of thing. We don't think about that. We think about responsible gambling as having to be just this, don't do this, or limit yourself. Again, affect. And that's where the emotion comes in. Emotion is so powerful in advertising. So if you thought about, going back to the beginning, I said you were probably exposed to 6,000 to 10,000 ads yesterday, right? If I asked you if you can remember those, you probably would think of the one that made you laugh, that made you cry, that made you feel good. You start thinking about that in your mind because those are what resonate with people. So most of you probably heard of St. Jude's Research Hospital in Memphis. I lived in Memphis for 18 years. And a lot of you might be a partner in hope. $19 a month, I was for many, many years. You watch their commercials, and I know people who work there, it's students, whatever, but their philosophy, and it's terrible because they're a wonderful organization and they're the best fundraisers in the world, LSAC, is show more bald kids and you'll get more money. It's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. And they are the best fundraising organization around LSAC. Why? Because they're preying on your emotions. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I won't even comment about that. But showing those bald kids, I'm sure you've all seen those commercials for St. Jude, and Marla Thomas, her father, founded it. They work because what's going on is you're feeling that, and you're thanking God that your child does not have cancer, and hopefully nobody's in here has. So you want to help those. You have compassion. That's that compassion. You can do that with responsible gambling. You can fun. People like to have fun. Make it fun. You can do that. Isn't that what gambling's supposed to be about? Fun? Well, show it fun. Show having fun. People can relate to that. That's the relevant activities and a positive emotion. Have fun. But show how you're doing that, quote, responsibly, because I actually hate that term. It came in from the alcohol industry when it first came around. It's what we have, but eventually it will be changed, but that's kind of beyond me. But have fun. Show the fun. Again, make it relatable to somebody. The other thing is, and this goes back to what Dr. Fong said, is user-generated content. In Web 2.0, we have this ability to create our own content. We didn't have that in the original web. Web 2.0 was all about user-generated content, right? So have people come on, have your peers come on, all online. And we talk about social media. Well, yeah, use social media. You can use social media, use it for user-generated content. You can have user-generated content in communities, not even necessarily on social media. And there's social media posts, so organizations can have their own posts. Or you can have social media advertising, which is different than just social media. Social media really doesn't cost you anything. If you have your own page, you can have your own Facebook, your own Instagram page. You don't have to pay for that. It's when you do sponsored posts. And this is the only one I could come up with when I was putting this together, but it cracked me up, was the Dollar Shave Club. But if you look up there underneath barely, it says sponsored. That's a paid ad. So that's an option if you really want to get into certain places and certain spaces on social media, depending on your market. I'm not going to do that for my 88-year-old cousins, but I might do that for my son. So that's where your market comes in. But you can do any one of those. You can do any of these things online. And online, obviously, is where it's at. But if your market is not online, don't go online. But obviously, there's quite a bit online. But we cannot forget about the market. For example, if you go to any casino, I live near the M Resort, I would say the average age in there is about 70. I'm guessing 75. But that's because a lot of seniors do gamble. Nothing wrong with that. Are they at risk for problem gambling? Yeah. Are they problem gamblers? I don't know. But let's not let them get there. Let's reach out to them. Let's have people their own age. Let's have people talk to them about their stories and common stories, and we will stop them, hopefully, from becoming problem gamblers, that they will engage in, quote, responsible play. So again, matching the market, but I'm not going to go to them with user-generated contact. I'm going to go to them in the casino or through the flyers or the magazines that they still read or the daily newspaper that some of them still get. Yeah, because they are an important market that we can't forget about them. So again, it's all these different markets, and we need to match that market, and we need to be creative, and we need to be relevant to every one of these groups, and we need to tug on their emotions. That's going to get them involved. That's going to get them to pay attention. And that might actually get them to read the message and say, hey, maybe I did spend too much yesterday. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I played too long. But that's what we want to do. We don't want them to become problem gamblers. We want them to actually continue to play, sustainable play, enjoying their play, having fun, and continuing to be responsible players. So now, if this is one of the technical problems we had. We did pull it up for somehow or another. We weren't able to get this to go, even though it's in there. So this is one of my favorite ads. This is a relatively recent ad, and this was put together by the NBA, MLB, and the NHL. And it is a responsible gambling ad that is on the web and other places. And when I saw this, I was like, this pulls it all together. And that's why I was like, we've got to get to show this. So I had it embedded, but we ran into a technical problem. I have it on Dropbox on my phone, but it's a little bit of a small screen. So we're going to get this going. But I wanted to share this with you. Okay, so I think we got it. As I said, this is a great ad.
We love the game because anything can happen. There's no sure thing. Every play, every shot, every swing is a risk if you bet. There's no easy money. There's no luck, and no one wins all the time. So if you bet responsibly, and always set a limit.
So that ad opened with what? With action, right? With playing. So if you're a sports fan, you immediately paid attention, right? That was awesome. I thought that was awesome when I found this ad. Immediately. So the sports player, whether a sports bettor or not, they're going to immediately pay attention. So it got them in. And then you're watching the action. So it brought you in, it engaged people, and it also got their emotions going, right? They're playing.